Without any warning, my sister had once again entrusted her children to my care before vanishing into thin air for 2 long, anxious days, only to reappear entangled in a legal nightmare and a whirlwind of family drama. I'm using a disposable account for this story, as these raw details simply don't belong on my usual profile. I'm a 28-year-old woman, and my older sister Jackie, 32, a single mother, has 2 kids, an elder son and a younger daughter. Her son is 14, while her daughter, who just celebrated her 12th birthday only a couple of weeks ago, beams with the spirit of youth. With their father long out of the picture, Jackie has been steering the ship of single motherhood through stormy waters. We're neither inseparable nor bitter foes. A kind of quiet indifference has defined our relationship over the years. Yet, just as calm can be deceptive, the true storm was about to break. Barely 6 hours ago, Jackie burst into my home with urgency blazing in her eyes, demanding to know where her children were. I was utterly baffled. I hadn't been around for the past 4 days, having lost myself on a sunlit beach escape with my boyfriend, blissfully unaware of any arrangements made in my absence. According to her frantic account, 2 days prior she had dropped the kids off at my place, instructing them to ring the doorbell so I'd usher them inside while she hurried off to run errands. She insisted she'd sent me a text about it, though my phone stubbornly showed nothing of the sort, a fact I demonstrated in real time. Yet as she scrolled through my messages, the elusive text materialized, a dispatch from before her departure, likely overlooked because I was too absorbed in vacation mode. Panic surged in her voice as she accused me of carelessness, leaving both of us clueless about the whereabouts of her precious ones. The stakes had suddenly risen, and the tension in the room was almost tangible. She recalled that in her rush she had driven off without confirming that her kids had safely entered the house, relying completely on me to keep them safe. With a tremor in her voice, she confessed that a murky legal entanglement had forced her into hiding for 2 days, and now, upon her return, she demanded her children immediately. I was caught in a vortex of uncertainty and hesitantly suggested she contact the authorities, for I truly had no idea where the kids might be, especially since they weren't carrying their phones. But Jackie balked at the idea of involving the cops. She'd just emerged from her own tumultuous ordeal, and any official intervention was the last thing she needed. In a fury, she turned my house upside down, accusing me of selfishness and neglecting the well-being of her children. Bitterly, she lamented that she'd counted on me to help her through this crisis, and that I had, in her eyes, utterly let her down. Tears streamed down her face as she stormed out, vowing to knock on every relative's door until she found them. Left standing in the wreckage of her departure, I felt like an absolute fool, unable to fathom how missing one text while on vacation could somehow be my fault. But the roller coaster of events was far from over. Update 1. After 4 grueling days, a glimmer of relief has finally emerged amid the chaos. I reached out to Jackie, haunted by guilt over the overlooked message, even if the blame wasn't entirely mine. Today, she revealed that her children had, against all odds, managed to find refuge at their uncle's house, where they had been sheltering for several days. Intriguingly, this guardian wasn't a direct relative but rather the cousin of Jackie's former flame, a man who had maintained a secret online connection with his nephew, knowing full well that his own mother would have cut off their contact otherwise. At first, I found this arrangement rather eerie, but then it struck me that this man, Frank, a 28-year-old whose unconventional kindness had essentially rescued the children during our absence, had been their saving grace. With a rare note of remorse, Jackie apologized for her earlier outburst, admitting that her behavior was out of character for someone usually so level-headed. She confessed that anxiety had robbed her of sleep these past few days, her mind tormented by worry over her kids' safety. Finally, I pressed her on why she'd shunned the police and what dire circumstances had forced her to leave them behind. Reluctantly, she admitted that she'd embarked on a dangerous mission to gather evidence against her employer. Rumor had it they were scheming to pin an embezzlement scandal on her amidst a staggering financial crisis. Upper management had conveniently eyed her as the scapegoat, given her position as head of accounting and her access to every secret of the company's finances. Foreseeing her inevitable dismissal, she resolved to collect every scrap of evidence that might exonerate her, even venturing out of town to enlist her ex-boss's testimony during the ensuing hearings. Tormented by guilt for having abandoned her children without checking on their well-being, she raged at the unfolding betrayal of her own values, having always prided herself on honesty. Her deep-seated fear of involving the police, lest her reputation be tarnished or her children taken away, had paralyzed her judgment. In a shattering moment of vulnerability, she admitted that she hadn't even packed a single warm garment for her kids despite the biting cold outside, all because she was so consumed by her personal crisis. Yet even as these revelations tumbled out, the emotional toll was far from over. I did my best to soothe her shattered nerves, though deep down I couldn't ignore the fact that neglecting one's children is never justifiable, no matter the personal turmoil. Truth be told, Jackie and I have long since drifted from our parents, leaving us as each other's sole anchors. We might not be the closest of friends, but our unspoken pact of loyalty has been our constant since childhood. I felt a piercing regret for not being able to care for her kids when they needed us most. Fortune, however, had a strange way of intervening. Her son's memory of Frank's address, gleaned from old online chats, turned out to be their lifeline. By pure accident, while rummaging through his Instagram messages, she discovered this crucial detail. In her days, it hadn't even occurred to her until she powered up her laptop, knowing that her son often used it for games and chats. She logged in on a whim and uncovered Frank's connection. It turned out that Frank didn't even have Jackie's contact number, which left him unable to reach her when the children unexpectedly appeared at his doorstep. Once a familiar face who visited frequently before his cousin relinquished custody of the kids 4 years ago, Frank's visits had since dwindled after Jackie distanced herself from his family, effectively severing his bond with them. In the tangled web of familial duty and personal crisis, the uncertain path ahead loomed ominously. Yet, miraculously, he managed to re-establish contact with his nephew through the digital ether. In an unexpected twist, it turned out that Jackie's own son had tracked down his estranged uncle online and fired off the very first message. I suppose children always seem to remember who truly stood by them in their early days. Regardless, a measure of relief washed over me knowing that Jackie had recovered her little ones, freeing me from the lingering guilt of having missed that crucial text. I only pray she can untangle her emotional baggage so her children no longer have to bear the weight of her past mistakes. Update 2. It has finally come to pass. Jackie's company terminated her employment, and, just as she had dreaded, they are now mobilizing legal forces against her. They leveled embezzlement charges and vowed to see her locked behind bars. The poor woman is trembling with terror, bombarding me with messages almost every hour in a desperate bid for someone to confide in. Although she does have a skilled lawyer by her side, she now faces a titanic adversary, and no one can predict what may come next. She begged Frank and me to look after her children and lend a hand whenever needed, fearing history might repeat itself and leave her kids abandoned once more. Without hesitation, we both agreed to step in. She's wading through a harrowing ordeal and needs every bit of empathy and support we can muster. Update 3. Today, Jackie and representatives from her company met with a court-appointed mediator, and she left the children with me. They're such wonderful kids, and it breaks my heart that their mother must suffer through this turmoil. Perhaps the sole silver lining is that this crisis has, in a strange way, drawn Jackie and me closer together. Last night, as she dropped the kids off at my place, I insisted she stay for dinner. I couldn't bear the thought of her facing the long, lonely night on her own. Yet, before dawn crept in and the children finally surrendered to sleep, Jackie broke down completely, confessing how nearly a decade of her life had been devoted to that company, only to have them betray her without a second thought. I held her through those dark hours, urging her to remain with me, for I simply couldn't let her drive off in such a fragile state. Even this morning, her jittery nerves and anxious eyes told me all I needed to know, perhaps entirely natural, yet unbearably painful in her situation. I offered to drive her to ease her burdens, but she insisted on handling the school drop-off herself, needing someone to watch over the kids while I rushed off to work. Frank has since arranged to collect the children after school and return them to her place, a neat system we've managed to establish. I cling to the hope that this makeshift routine is only temporary and that Jackie will soon reclaim her life. I realize this update might not sizzle with the drama many expected, but my worry for Jackie is overwhelming, and I'm turning to an online community for support. Update 4. I just uncovered a revelation from Jackie that explains her earlier, palpable nervousness before the meeting, even though she hadn't actually committed any of the alleged misdeeds. Apparently, she'd been entangled in a clandestine affair with one of her subordinates for nearly 2 years, a secret liaison she dreaded her company would weaponize against her, and, sure enough, that's exactly what happened. Matters worsened when it emerged that this covert relationship had never been disclosed to HR, making it all the more condemnable. Even more damning was that she had initiated the affair herself and failed to inform her lawyer, leaving him completely blindsided when it surfaced during the meeting. To add salt to the wound, her boyfriend essentially handed over every text and snippet of evidence to the company, betraying her in the most painful way. Later, he coldly explained that they had offered him the very position she once held, leaving him, in his own words, with no real choice, though in truth, he had chosen self-interest over loyalty. When Jackie returned home and spilled all these details, I didn't hold back my criticism, calling her actions recklessly irresponsible and foolish. Not only was she endangering herself by withholding the truth from her lawyer and those who cared about her, but she was also neglecting her children, who longed for her constant presence. Amid her tears, my anger eclipsed my sympathy as I declared that we all deserve better. If she refused to embrace honesty and transparency, there was little any of us could do to save her. After the meeting, her lawyer nearly walked away because she hadn't been entirely forthright. I stressed that now wasn't the time to guard her image or reputation, it was time to focus on saving herself from a potential life behind bars. If necessary, she needed to reveal every unsavory secret to protect herself. Although she hesitated, she eventually admitted she was considering coaxing her ex-boyfriend into explaining via text why he had betrayed her, solid proof of the company's deliberate sabotage. I urged her to make that call, and soon enough, that self-absorbed man confessed over the phone. We recorded his words and sent them off to her lawyer immediately. While we can't be sure if this evidence will hold sway, at least we know we tried. As for any further incriminating proof, the company has little leverage unless they resort to fabricating evidence. Thankfully, she still possesses all the original financial documents from before her firing, ensuring they can't easily distort the facts. Ultimately, the gravest charge against Jackie was her affair with her subordinate, a scandal meant only to tarnish her character rather than serve as the crux of the lawsuit. For all I care, here's the raw truth: my childhood was forged in neglect and chaos. My parents, both lost in the grip of drugs, abandoned us entirely, proving to be the worst guardians imaginable. We survived solely on the kindness and generosity of neighbors and distant relatives, having been raised to expect nothing from those who were supposed to protect us. Naturally, Jackie and I learned to stand on our own. Trust was a luxury we could ill afford. The moment I turned 18, they cast us aside, urging us to build our own lives while they tired of the burden we represented, even though they rarely offered help. We never knew our grandparents. Our only kin were an elderly aunt on my mother's side and my dad's second cousin, a man who once lived on our street and supported us after we were exiled. He even saw us through college, until, when Jackie graduated, he accepted a job out of state, and with that, our connection was severed. Since then, it's just been the two of us, determined to build a life far removed from our horrible parents and tumultuous past. The last time we heard from them was about 6 years ago. My mother called to announce that our father had been diagnosed with dementia. There was no warm invitation to return home, she merely informed us because he kept asking about us. Jackie and I considered a visit once, but life's relentless pace swept that thought away. Since that call, not a single phone ring has disturbed our quiet independence, and we haven't even mustered the will to check on them. Truth be told, we don't even know if they're still alive, and a strange guilt holds us back from discovering the truth. Our lives now flourish without their interference. They don't care about us, so why should we care about them? Perhaps it paints us as ungrateful children, but in reality, they were abysmal parents. And so, we move forward, forever marked yet unburdened by the past. Update 6. To everyone who's been following our saga, I must say your kindness has been overwhelming. I relayed to Jackie every supportive comment and heartfelt message we received, and her gratitude runs deep. At last, the legal nightmare has receded. She secured an out-of-court settlement with the company that betrayed her, pocketing a substantial sum in exchange for silence over the fabricated evidence and spurious accusations. Free from that toxic environment, she's already hunting for new opportunities, a task made easier by her wealth of experience. For now, the settlement funds cover her bills and expenses, allowing her to reclaim a sense of normalcy. Nearly 4 months have slipped by since my last update, and in that time, so much has evolved that it feels as though all of you are part of our journey. In fact, when you include Frank, the bond between us three is unspoken yet unbreakable. Frank and I have grown close over these past months, our paths crossing whenever Jackie's attorney kept her busy and one of us had to watch the kids. Whether he was dropping them off at my place or vice versa, these chance meetings blossomed into genuine friendship. He's undeniably funny and kind, a beacon of light amid the chaos that brought us together. Though Jackie teases that he might fancy me, I remain convinced he's not my type. Even if he were, I'm not looking for romance. We're content as steadfast friends. Returning to the matter at hand, Jackie has finally put the lawsuit to bed, showing those responsible exactly where they stand by forcing them to pay hush money and sign an ironclad NDA. With the threat of dragging their company's reputation to the ground permanently averted, she chose to accept the settlement quietly, eschewing further drama or legal entanglements. She confided that she'll be seeking therapy, both on her own and with her children, as she fears that her past mistakes might continue to jeopardize her ability to be the mother they deserve. In an effort to ease her burden, I offered for her to move in with me temporarily. Under one roof, I could help look after the kids whenever she felt overwhelmed, ensuring they'd never again be endangered by neglect. She hasn't decided yet, explaining that she needs time to consider such a monumental change, not just for herself, but for her children as well. I urged her to take all the time she needs, though I'm convinced that sharing a home would benefit us all. I, too, have felt the pang of loneliness, and having them around over the past few months has been a comfort I never expected. I even dream of turning this arrangement into something more permanent, or at least semi-permanent, as I long for a family of my own someday. For now, though, I'm simply relieved that the worst is behind us. Update 7. It's nearly been a year since my last update, and it feels surreal to be back sharing our story. In my previous post, I mentioned that Frank seemed interested in me, though I insisted he wasn't my type. Yet, as fate would have it, Jackie was right. Frank and I have been together for almost 6 months now. Revisiting this thread compelled me to share that I now can't imagine being with anyone else. Jackie is overjoyed. Not only did her chaotic missteps last year yield something positive, but she's also thriving professionally, now employed at a stable company in a higher position with better pay. Just a couple of weeks ago, she moved out, setting up just down the street so our visits remain as frequent as ever, almost as if she were still here. One unexpected bonus is that Frank plans to move in with me next week. Having spent the past 5 years without dating anyone, this is a monumental shift for me, and deep down, I know it's meant to be. Frank is the kindest, most sensitive soul I've ever met. His humor lights up even the darkest days. It's no wonder my nephew reached out to him as soon as he joined social media. The children are flourishing too. My niece now tops her class, a true point of pride, while my nephew, though not academically inclined, shines on the football field and might even make the varsity team if he keeps up his momentum. Reflecting on last year's trials fills me with immense gratitude for everything we have now, and as we face the future, I know our unbreakable bond will carry us through whatever comes next.